country is dependent on every other country, therefore has no power of individual action and individual decision-making. Free trade, which means freedom to exploit, which means you can get sweatshop workers here to make your stuff for a few cents, and then you ship it over here and you sell it for as much as you can get. It's called free trade. Everyone's in favor of free trade. You can't be against free trade. This is also part of this globalized centralization of power, which is designed to do this, and it increasingly is doing this. It means that if you're dependent within your country or your community on things outside of your influence, then everyone is dependent on everyone else, therefore has no self-sufficient ability to make decisions in their own lives and their own communities and their own countries. And the reason that they want to do this is they want to make everyone dependent on something outside their control, because dependency equals control. It's like abundance and scarcity. We live in a world which could be incredibly abundant. Nobody should be hungry on this planet, for goodness sake. Africa could feed the bloody world. It can't even feed itself. Why? Because of the manipulation of that continent by this crowd. And so we have all over the world, because there's no empathy, no consequences for them emotionally of their actions, we have manufactured scarcity, because abundance equals choice equals freedom. Scarcity equals dependency equals control. And that's why we have manufactured dependency. We have people hungry in a world of plenty. Coordinate 3, the cement. There are certain organizations, networks, rings, that act as the cement that holds the web together and holds people within the web together. Close to the spider people are the Rothschilds. And when I talk about the Rothschilds, one thing, I'm not talking about all people called Rothschild. The vast majority of people called Rothschild won't have a clue what other Rothschilds in that dynasty are doing. And secondly, I don't even mean only people called Rothschild. I mean the Rothschild bloodline, which has infiltrated many other enormous numbers of other families and groups, which then come to power under other names other than Rothschild. Because if the president's Rothschild, the bloody guy here is Rothschild, the bloody newsreader's Rothschild, what's going on? Instead of that, you have people under different names. So I'm talking about the Rothschild bloodline and the scions of that family, the people that run that family. Not everyone called Rothschild. There's a lot of people in that family called Rothschild who don't have a clue what's going on. But they, through these various cements, control all these different and various apparently unconnected organizations. Now, one of the cements, of course, is the secret society network. That's pretty obvious when you look at it. And these are some of the major ones, but there are even more exclusive ones as well that operate in tiny, tiny cabals. But it's not just the secret society networks. They connect into the satanic networks, where they literally carry out human sacrifice and such horrors, which these bloodlines have been doing all the way through. Now, no one has a problem with the fact that then primitive ancients used to sacrifice people and torture people and all that stuff, but that was at one time kind of acceptable because it was the way they did things. As it's become unacceptable, it's still gone on, same bloodlines involved, but it goes on secretly, obviously. And this is the paedophile rings, the sexual child abuse rings, which connect into that and connect into that. That's not saying everyone in a secret society is a paedophile. It's not saying every Satanist is a paedophile. It's not saying every paedophile is a Satanist from every secret society. But there are rings, connections between these organizations and groups that hold them together. It's a bit like the Olympic rings. They connect into each other. And you find, this is why, as I researched this over these last 20 years, when I have researched through people in power like politicians and bankers and even some media people and stuff like that, you know, after this time of researching this and the recurring themes, that when you get far enough into it, you're going to come across a secret society, but you're almost certainly going to come across either or both Satanism and child abuse, sexual abuse, paedophilia. And there's a reason why the ratio of such people is massive in the upper echelons of this control structure than it is in the general population. There's a blueprint which you find in every community and every country. It's a blueprint of how this works and how the Satanists and the pedophiles and the secret society people end up in positions of power and influence to direct this conspiracy. So the pedophilia and the secret societies and the Satanists operating in these interconnecting rings then infiltrate their people right across the web, which holds the whole thing together. Now, Satanism is staggeringly common compared with the public perception of it. And there's a number of reasons for it. First of all, they're sacrificing people literally to the gods, the serpent gods. When you see these ancient accounts all over the world of how they used to sacrifice people, young virgins often, and what does young virgins code for? Children, to the gods, because they put them through the sacrifice ritual and they build up the terror. What happens is the terror reaches a point where a certain adrenaline pours into the blood, and the people doing the ritual then drink that blood and they get a real high from that adrenaline. But as the sacrifice is going on, the victim is also releasing energy, very powerful low vibrational energy, and the entities or entity, whatever it is, just outside of visible light is feeding off that energy. They're feeding off us like vampires in so many ways, and that's one of them, and one of the reasons for these sacrifices of people to the gods. The other thing is that they, and I've talked to Satanists who've seen this happen, or former Satanists around the world, they create an energetic environment which is almost a stepping stone, like halfway house, which allows these entities to come in to the ritual. I've talked to people who've seen these entities manifest in the rituals because of the way they have created the energetic environment. Anyone who's looked even mildly at this whole conspiracy in this area will know about Bohemian Grove in Northern California, where the elite, the presidents, the Bushes, the Kissingers, the Rockefellers, all these people go and take part in rituals under a 40-foot stone owl. And from what I am told by people who've been there in a victim state, they, in smaller groups, because it's 2,700 acres of redwood forest, actually do sacrifices there too. And all these people are involved with their satanic gods and all the rest of it. But it happens all over the world, and it happens in a sequence on certain days. You know, we've got a situation with Halloween where it's now like bloody Christmas. If people only knew what happens on Halloween, what happens across Beltane, May Day and all that stuff, to kids all over the world, in extraordinary numbers, there would be no celebration of Halloween. And what they're doing on one level, because they're interacting with the cycles, the astrological cycles, is why they do it at certain times when the planets, the moon probably, and everything is in a certain place, is they're manipulating what they refer to as the morphic field, the energy that we all live in. Like I said earlier, if you want to affect the fish all at once, then affect the sea. And in the new book, in an appendix at the end, I published this. I call it Confessions of a Satanist. It came to light early this year, and it is alleged to be, I can't vouch for its authenticity. What I can say is, after 20 years of researching this, it's bloody massively accurate. And it's supposed to be a guy who died in 2004. He was a high Satanist in Australia, who wasn't really a confession in the sense of I want to confess my sins. It was just basically an outline of how Satanism controls the world. And this is one of the things he says in that. What most people do not realize is that Satanism is a ritually based practice, and that this repetition, same place, same time, has over time left strong impressions upon the morphic field. They have to control the morphic field so that we stay in a low vibrational state, so we stay attached to that moon matrix I'm talking about. And of course, as I was saying, we are interacting with this field all the time, and taking in energy into the meridian system from it, and therefore it is affecting us. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm saying that this is part of the process of suppressing that field also, which is why they stuck them on vortex points. Now let's take this connection from Satanism, blood drinking, taking in the human genetic code to stay here longer, which is what some of these reptilians do, and the paedophilia. What's it all about? It's about energy. It's about vampiring the energy of children. The reason that we have sacrifice to the gods of young virgins, children, is because they want the energy of children before puberty, because when puberty happens, there is obviously we all know, there is a chemical change, massive chemical change, at which point, from their point of view, the energy is not as pure and desirable. This is what John Juan Matus said in one of the Carlos Castaneda books. He's being quoted here by Castaneda. Matus is the he. He explained that sorcerers saw infant human beings as strange luminous balls of energy, covered from the top to the bottom with a glowing coat, something like a coat of plastic adjusted tightly around the cocoon of energy. He said that glowing coat of awareness was what the predators consumed, and that when a human reached adulthood, all that was left of that fringe awareness was a narrow fringe that went from the ground to the top of the toes. That fringe permitted mankind to keep on living, but only barely. And that, although the pedophiles won't realize that, although the elite ones will, is what the pedophilia is all about and why it is so rampant in the upper echelons of this control system. Because while the pedophile is sexually abusing the child, symbolically here, it is connecting into the energy field of the child. This is why they have anal sex with children so much, even girls. It's because they're connecting in to the lower chakra, the base chakra, and they're drawing that energy out, or the possessing entity is drawing it out and feeding off it. This is why pedophiles tend to be overwhelmingly possessed people, because the possessing entity drives the lust for sex with children, and then when it happens, they draw the energy off it, drawing the child's life force out. And politicians in this control system, again, this is why paedophilia is rampant among the political classes. This is what the Satanist confession said as well, that Australian guy. Politicians are introduced by a carefully graded set of criteria and situations that enable them to accept that their victims, children, will be our little secret. Young children sexually molested and physically abused by politicians worldwide are quickly used as sacrifices. In Australia, the bodies are hardly ever discovered, for Australia is still a wilderness. In countries that are not a wilderness, they control the mortuaries and the crematoria, where they get rid of children who they want rid of because of what's happened. And it is rampant. I keep using that word, but it is. People don't realize. What happens is, people think or relate the number of children that go missing every year to the number of times we see a story on the news that a child is missing and everyone's trying to find them. That is the tiniest tip of the iceberg. Hundreds of thousands of children go missing in America every year. I've rung the states, because they don't have federal figures, tell you how many cars went missing federally, but not children. They said, you've got to ring the states. I rung a load of states years ago now. I said, how many children go missing every year? How many children went missing last year? And I added the figures up. What? Never seen this on the news. Hundreds of thousands. Some of them are found. Some of them have explanations. Not all. Nothing like. And what happens is that you have the cover-up. There are so many stories where the story of this Satanism and this child abuse starts to come to light, and immediately the lid goes on, because the system controls the various aspects that can keep the lid on. This is just one example. There's endless numbers around the world. The Franklin cover-up. It was an investigation by this guy, John W. DeCamp, who was former state senator in Nebraska, and he started investigating this guy, Lawrence King, a major Republican who sang the American National Anthem in 1984 and 1988, I think it was, at the Republican Convention. And he was investigating him for financial fraud through an organization called the Franklin Savings and Loans. But then he discovered that he's running a pedophile ring and providing children for the biggest names in America.